think I just killed a clone of me. I really hope it was a clone. Have you ever heard of the ship of Theseus? It's a thought experiment that proposes this question. Is an object with all its parts replaced still fundamentally the same object? This is the paradox that has been plaguing my mind ever since I made it back home. Ever since I saw my beautiful wife and daughter once again, or at least what I assume to be once again. When I first opened my eyes, the world surrounding me was so dark that I had thought for a moment I'd gone blind. Looking down, I could see the faintest hints of my grayed hour figure. I attempted to move my arms, but quickly discovered they were bound. Thin strands of what seemed to be fishing wire held my wrist to the armrest. Panic quickly set in, and I began thrashing my body around, only stopping when I felt the wires around my ankles and wrist tightening from the struggle. Attempting to calm my breathing, I scanned the area around me, hoping my eyes would adjust to the darkness and reveal something to me. Every inhale, I could feel stale air and dust particle coating my tongue. The dry air pluming into my chest started making it hard to breathe. I was still groggy, and when I tried calling out to get someone's attention, I could feel the groaning in my voice, like two bricks rubbing against each other. From across the room, I heard similar noises to the ones I was making, the sounds of wire scraping against wood, the helplessness of a body fighting against its firm captor. "You'll make it worse if you move," I spoke into the voice, my voice struggling past the grains of debris in my throat. "What's going on? Who are you?" A man's voice replied, but it was like my voice had an echo when he spoke, an echo that warped into new words upon hitting the walls. I was taken aback when I heard him speak. Maybe my voice was too gravely for him to hear it, but he sounded just like me. "I'm Carlos. I'm assuming you're stuck. I am too." My reply was more for me than a direct response to him. I wanted the man across from me to know that I wasn't a threat, that whatever we were in, it was together. My fingers trembled around the end of the armrest, looking for a way I could slip the wires over or a weak point in the wood. That when the very rips of my fingers fell on a small and cold plastic circle just within reach under the armrest. I inspected it as much as I could, and when I put pressure on it, I could feel it sliding in further. It was a button. "Do you have a button?" I asked. "Under your right armrest?" I furthered the instruction. I heard the wires around his wrist scraping the wood for a moment before the man replied, stating there wasn't one. My confusion over the differences in our chairs melted away when the room became flooded with intense yellow light. With the lights buzzing around us, I and the man finally got a good look at each other, both of our jaws hanging open in awe. "What the hell is this?" The man across from me spoke. His voice had lowered substantially. He wasn't asking me. It was more like he was mulling it over. I could only stare, scrutinize each piece of the man before my eyes looking for some imperfection, something to delineate the two of us, from the dark brown hair to the white sneakers with green stains from the lawn on them. We were the spitting image of each other. I was looking at myself, even the way my nose bent slightly to the left from when Andrew Mackey found me flirting with his girlfriend in high school. Every time he talked or moved, I would observe the wrinkles around his mouth or how the fabric altered around him. Every single thing was the damn same. Then it dawned on me. The lights didn't just happen to come on. Someone must have been around to turn them on. Once again, I looked around the room, observing as much as I could with my limited range of movement. The room was sterile, like a cleared-out hospital room. It was much smaller than I expected. It felt like my voice traveled forever before hitting a wall, but the room was no bigger than some apartment living room. "Can you see anything behind me?" I asked the man, trying to keep a calm composure, but still running over the possibilities in my head. A twin brother, maybe. That wouldn't explain the matching scars I've acquired over the years. No, just more of the same walls. He said I could sense in his voice that he too was bringing his anxiety to a more manageable level. Of course, he was acting like me too. "What's the last thing you remember?" I questioned. Maybe I could find an explanation if I knew how we both got here. The last thing I remembered was exiting work. It was a long day and I was running late, so the sun was setting. Then the van pulled up. "A van." The man spoke, the matter of fact. "Where do you work?" "Ellington." He responded. He didn't even have to stop and think about it. It was already in his thoughts. Because I made him think of the van, which made him think about leaving work. Me too. The whole picture wasn't something I wanted to see, but I was putting the pieces together nonetheless, which meant the man sitting in front of me was doing the same. We knew what we were looking at before we heard the crackle chime in around us. "Nod if you can hear me." A voice with a difficult-to-pin-down accent spoke. His voice seemed to emit from each corner of the room. I watched the man across from me nodding his head up and down slowly, and I followed suit. "Fantastic. For sake of simplicity, I'm going to make nicknames for you two." He continued. "The Carlos with the button under his armrest will be called Mr. B for button. The man without one will be called Mr. A. Nod, if you understand." Once again, me and Mr. A nodded our heads in unison. We knew we were in no position to be making demands. Neither had seen so much as a door leading out of the room. "Allow me to explain your predicament." The accented voice of God began. "One of you is the original Carlos Ackers. The other one is a clone." As we listened to the man speak, me and Mr. A locked eyes, like we were trying to see if a soul existed in the other person. "It's up to Mr. B to make the decision." Mr. A's face contorted. When I watched him scrunch up, I wanted to say he looked different. I wanted to say he was clearly a fake, but even in distress, his face was mine. "Pushing that button, Mr. B, will kill Mr. A." My fingers had been subconsciously meandering around the button since I first woke up. The cool plastic was calming me. It quickly became a source of concern. "How do we know which one's the original?" Mr. A spoke aloud. He said it just as I was moving my lips to say the same thing. Each of us was thinking the same thought, though. Did it matter who was the original? "Ah, yes, great question. The clone is rather perfect," God whispered through the loudspeakers. "Memories, emotions, and physical attributes, all the same." It was like a game of Russian roulette, both of us intensely eyeing each other. For just something, anything to set us apart. The only difference being, the original got to live that life you both remember. You have 30 minutes to decide. If Mr. B doesn't push the button, he dies. After that, we heard the fuzzing interrupted by a sharp click. We were alone again. The voice had said everything it wanted to say. We were an experiment, and now, all that was left. Observation and results. It's hard to describe, but it felt like there was an argument going on between ourselves that only took place in our minds. We became increasingly aware of how futile it would be to make a case to the other. Everything I could say, he could confirm. The names of my wife and daughter, my crush in middle school, and my biggest fears. He could echo them back through crystal clarity. All we had to go off was the room around us. "Let's agree on some," Mr. A asserted. I broke the trance I had fallen into and asked him to continue. The original should go free. There was no way to argue that logic. Of course, the original should continue to live. The clone was just a product. It never actually experienced the life the memories would portray. "So, how do we figure that out?" I responded. There was no doubt in my mind. We were both convinced we were the original. How could I be a clone? How could he be a clone? "Why do you have the button? Would he give the original the button?" His proposal was sound. Would the clone have the button to kill its template? It seemed reasonable the test would be weighted towards the original surviving unless they were seeing how human they could make the clone, if it could make hard decisions like this. No, that doesn't help, I responded, but I could see in his face that he had already come to the same conclusion I had. Then we talked. We both knew it was useless, but we talked, and it was oddly therapeutic. Having everything laid out before my eyes, exactly how I felt and thought about the events in my life said through someone else's lips, put a lot into perspective for me. The conversation made me feel that I had to be the original. There was no way I could feel the things I was feeling if I was a product, right? More and more, my finger drifted towards the plastic button. If I just pressed it without warning, either way, I'd be the one to live. Clone or not, I would be alive. Neither of us knew how much time had passed. It was impossible to tell, but as it went on, I started to worry that Mr. A was stalling me. If enough time passed, it was reasonable to believe he would live by default. He could see it, he was trying to hide it, but I would never be able to, so neither could he. His eyes nervously twitching to gaze at the button, watching my fingers moving about. What if none of this is even real, just a test, doesn't matter? He spoke, his voice was becoming grainy as he breathed in the stale air. All the power was in my hands, and he knew that he had to create doubt in my head. That's what I would do. How long has it been? I questioned. Probably around 20 minutes, he replied. I wanted him to say that it had only been a few minutes, then I could call bullshit. I just wanted anything to come along and justify hitting that button, but I could stop thinking about it. If I was the clone, walking around living this man's life, relishing in the things I didn't earn, nor deserve. If I killed this man and he was the original, what kind of monster would I be? It's okay either way, right? He spoke with a smile. Even if the clone leaves here, they'll be taken care of. With those words pressing into my chest, I thought of them again and couldn't help but reflect his smile. I had decided, genuinely was ready to let time run out at that moment. That way neither of us had to choose. That's when he did it. Still wearing that smile, he suddenly threw his body forward and gave a quick scream like he was some cheap jump scare. His actions snapped me out of my thoughts, so harsh that it made me reactively move backward and clutch the armrest. Before I could stop myself, I felt the cool plastic under my fingertips being pressed in until a soft buzz was created. "No!" I pleaded as the buzzing halted. Hanging in the suspense, I watched Mr. A looking around the room before returning his gaze to me with a smile. The breath we had both been holding in since the button press was released. "See, just a test, no Mr. A's body began rocking back and forth, a small prelude to the violent shaking that followed it. I could see the wires around his wrist glowing a red hot, and he convulsed in the chair, still confined by the wires. All I could do was watch as he thrashed around, the wood of the chair bending nearly to the point of shattering in half. My words would fall on deft ears, and my actions wouldn't be seen by boiling eyes. It felt like I was dying, like I was watching from outside my own body as I was fried to death. I felt a phantom pain burn in my chest as my emotions escaped and formed into streams running down my cheek. And then Mr. A was still. Slumped over and smoking in the chair, I would have sat forever if I didn't see a small line of black forming in the corner. A door was opening and the arms of the chair holding my arms were dropped. This allowed me enough wiggle room to slip my arms back and free them from the wires. Reaching down to tug at the wires around my ankles, I did my best not to inhale the scent of the burning body across from me or think of the implications. The rest of my time spent in that building might as well have been some kind of fever dream. There was nothing but silence as I rose from my chair and left the room. A long, dark hallway with a singular light at the end of it. I found myself surrounded by trees and thick foliage upon exiting the tunnel, leaving the small metal hatch behind me. Eventually, I found the outskirts of the forest where my car was waiting for me and drove home. My thoughts and feelings were left in that room. Part of me only interprets the events as a dream. When I saw my wife and child again, it was like I had never left. They welcomed me with open arms. Why wouldn't they? I'm me, right? I love them all the same. I laugh with them, I work hard, I'm a good guy. The same good guy I've always been, that I remember always being. So why is it? Whenever I catch sight of the small scar hiding in between my pointer and middle finger, I can't remember if I've always had it or not.